Oriah, and I am here with the very special Stephen Mehler. And he is a chematologist, and he has been studying the history of human evolution in all of its forms for over 55 years. It has been extremely educational. We have a series of weekly interviews where he has just basically been unloading all of his data from his 3 amazing books that you definitely have to get. Go look in the description for the links. And today we're doing a part 2 of our human evolution of sexuality. He's giving us a tour of how this all happened from the beginning, how men and women interact and how our belief systems have started and where we're headed and where we're going and why do we treat each other the way we do today. It has been extremely enlightening, and I'm also going through my own spiritual revolution and sexual revolution. And thanks to Stephen, you're helping me along with this too. You're giving me permission to be vocal and come out as a woman and talk about sexuality in a really big way. So I thank you as being a man, and to me you're genderless, but you know, you're a man and you're telling us basically it's okay. All of it is okay.
Yes. Well, in our previous sessions, I've been sort of like charging ahead. I'm a Sagittarius. As I said to you, we can discuss astrology today because astrology and sexuality, very interesting, because I've studied the astrological signs as far as their sexuality, so we can discuss that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a Sagittarius, Aquarius rising. Hakeem was an Aquarius, Sagittarius rising.
And for those who don't know who Hakeem is,
that's my great spiritual teacher. And he was a chematologist. We formed this field of chematology together. I knew him for the last 16 years of his life. He was an incredible indigenous wisdom keeper. So there is a compatibility. So we will talk about sexuality and signs. But I did want to be more conversational today because it seems like I've been charging over you a lot, and I don't like to do that.
What can we do?
I know, but that's my Sagittarian nature. I tend to sometimes.
I have Leo rising. Don't worry. When it's time, I know how to get in there.
I have Mars and Leo too, so we can talk. When you talk about a person's sexuality, you have to not just do the sun sign, but the rising sign, Venus, Mars, and the moon. So we can discuss those things. But I know there were topics that we wanted to get to today. Again, you are not unique in that there were women like you all throughout. Now, I said we were going to talk about 5,000 years of patriarchy. But in those 5,000 years, there were movements in every culture, many different cultures, many different systems, where women stood out and rebelled against it. I thought of you very much the other night because on PBS, there was a great special about women's suffrage. And they talked about a great meeting in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. This is where Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony formed the suffrage movement, and they were the pioneers. You would have been there. If you had been born in, say, 1830, 18 years old in 1848, you would probably have joined the movement. I would tell everybody who's interested in this subject to Google Elizabeth Cady Stanton's speech at the 1848 Seneca Falls conference, because she attacked patriarchy.
Really?
Went right out. The only thing she knew was Christianity, because that's what she was raised in. But she attacked Christianity and its treatment of women sexually. So the movement really began in 1848. So we've had different periods. Now I talked about, there was another book I wanted to recommend to you and your folks. I talked about Masters and Johnson and Mary Jane Sherfy. Well, there was a follow-up in the 70s by a lady named Sherry Hite, H-I-T-E. I got it right here. And it came out, it was called The Hite Report. She interviewed over 3,000 women in the 70s and wrote her book in 1976. Mm-hmm. And it showed the difference from Kinsey in the 40s to the 70s, what had happened, the sexual revolution, and the different experiences women were having that their mothers and grandmothers did not have. Again, my generation, the baby boomers, the women of the baby boomers, who are in their 70s and 80s now, they were the pioneers.
I believe that. I do have my first question.
Go right ahead.
So if there was no religion, I mean, this is kind of a basic general question, but if there was no religion and women were just allowed to be free all the way up until today, would we have a different civilization, a different...
Oh my God. But again, you see, it's the cycles are the cycles. We can't blame. Again, everybody wants to put fault. It was very popular in the 70s for radical feminists, radical lesbian feminists to blame men. Men were the enemy. Men were our enemy. They've oppressed us, suppressed us. That accomplished nothing. It's really the same as African Americans blaming white people.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's true, but it doesn't accomplish an end. So if the cycle hadn't changed, sure, things would be different. But the cycles are the cycles. There's nobody to blame, and there's no accident. It is the way it is. We have to go through periods of enlightenment. It's like going up, up, up. I hit the high peak in Aten, where we're all basically enlightened, and then we fall. Amen. We come down into darkness at night. So
men are biologically created different. They don't have the same requirements and needs, I think, in sexuality as women do, where we're more connected to the emotional aspect.
That's generalization. That's labels that were put on to behave that way. We talked about we are all feminine, masculine. We are combinations of both those energies. I ended last week and we'll continue it again. The most enlightened men are those that have opened up their feminine side.
So
and the most
become more emotional sexually, like we need to be emotionally invested before we can have.
So do men. Yes, it's true. That's a generalization. As I said, women invented face-to-face sex. Women invented us having relationships around sexualities that invented love. You could say women invented love, invented relationships, because the bonding was always from matriarchal, mother to child. Mother to child. That's where we learned love, from our mother. Where we learned to be human, from our mother. So love comes from the feminine. So men have to understand that. Again, 51-49. We're almost all there. Again, we're going to discuss homosexuality. We need to. And we're going to discuss things like pedophilia. Subjects that you wanted to discuss.
And also young people, they hit puberty and they want to have sex, and religion says you have to wait.
Now you wanted to come to pedophilia, so you opened the door.
Well, yeah, it'll go there.
There was a nervousness you had when we were discussing Kemet and about children being considered adults at a young age. You were afraid that maybe we were promoting sex with children or pedophilia. So let's discuss it, okay? Okay. In ancient Kemet, over 5,000 years ago, the child was considered an adult at 8 years old. Now, desert climate, perhaps they reached puberty earlier, or the fact that there's no taboos, no labels put on. And again, they were not considered children. There was no separation, children and adults. Child was called the little sesh. Sesh, the general term which meant the people. 42 tribes of all different races and peoples. Sesh. So children were just little sesh. They weren't considered inferior. They couldn't understand what an adult could tell them. They couldn't comprehend complex ideas. No. They sat at the fires with the adults. They sat with the adults. They listened to the conversations. If the adults talked sex, the children heard it. Okay. Now, do we say they had sex at 8? We don't know. We can't say that. But they probably reached puberty much younger than we do today. Because in this age of Amen, we've been pushed back the adulthood child. And we make children more dependent on adults or needing to be taken care of until much later, till 18 years old. In this society.
Now 27, 28.
Well, no, but in this society legally, it's now 18. It used to be 21, but now it's pushed down to 18. Okay. The difference why is pedophilia. If you define pedophilia as a sexual act, abuse of a child by an adult against their will, without consent, that's the difference. If a child in Kemet was 12 years old, say a girl, and she wanted to learn fully her sexuality, she'd be sent to the Temple of Hathor. And she could have lesbian affairs. She could have sex. She would be taught how to make love to a man. She would have sex. This is not pedophilia. This is consent.
And how many years or decades or centuries did that take place, do you think?
Up until patriarchy. Up until the advent of Judaism. Actually, Greeks and Romans really started patriarchy. But you see, here's the difference. Greeks and Romans still had the goddess. They invented what we call today orgies. Orgy is actually a Latin word. Group sex. So it had to be something different than what was normal. So special events. And it was the same in Kemet. Now listen, in Kemet. In Kemet, it was 360. They had a calendar of 360 days a year. So that's a degrees in a circle, right? 5 days were the New Year. They called them the intercalary days, where they would celebrate all 360 letters. So the Khemetans would party for 5 days, not just one night, New Year's Eve. They would stop all work, all farming, all harvesting, and they would have sex, 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 and more sex. 5 days of what we call orgies, 5 days of drinking, drunkenness, psychedelic drugs. That was to celebrate life itself. But in other days during the year were harvest festivals, were different festivals, where the Khemetan would celebrate the idea of Horus coming from his temple in Edfu, going up the Nile to Dendara, to greeting Hathor, and it would be the high priest of Amun, who would represent, high priest of Horus, who would represent Horus, would go and have ritualistic sex with the high priestess of
Was
Dendara.
this before the like southern Indian, like Goa, you see the temples where the Kama Sutra?
Same. Again, it's India, we're going to talk about Tantra. That's what we have to talk about. So India kept those festivals too. So it's the same. Asia and Africa reflected each other. So there were parties of, so the Greeks and the Romans didn't mind keep nations doing that. They adopted that. But they adopted patriarchy, where men would be in charge. The Jews stopped it all.
Right.
It stops in Leviticus. Leviticus is where homosexuality is first defined. And it is saying you only can have sex with your wife. So group sex was looked upon, orgies were condoned, and had the concept of homosexuality, which did not exist in matriarchal cultures.
Interesting.
Now here's an interesting, again, as you said, I've been into this subject for many years. I actually belonged to a singles group in San Jose, California in the 80s, where I was very much involved with a woman anthropologist at the time. She was a radical feminist. And we used to give talks on sexuality to this singles group. And I chose one day this one book to talk about, this huge book I'm going to show you now, written in 1971 by a psychiatrist. You see the title?
Yep.
Sexuality and Homosexuality. Even though he was contending in the book, he was looking at homosexuality from an objective perspective, the title itself gives away the bias. Homosexuality, sexuality, they're not the same. One is different than the other. It should all be just sexuality, and homosexuality is contained, but that's the bias. So the bias comes from a Judeo-Christian Islamic belief system.
The Romans had homosexuality.
Absolutely, and so did the Greeks.
And
the Greeks were what is called Greek love. Do you know what Greek love means? It means a man mounting another man from behind. It means male homosexuality.
And they used to carry a string off their belt if they were with a young boy, and the bathhouses. And
the idealized sexual partner for the Greeks and Romans was a young man, not a woman.
Right.
Because women were considered inferior.
Right. And the
not in Kemet.
The Vikings also had similar, like when they went out to war and battle for many months at a time, that's the ability they would keep that.
Okay. Right. So here we return to our heroes we talked about. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Wilhelm Reich, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, all saying the same thing. Sexual energy is natural. If it is repressed, if it is suppressed, it only results in disease. Neurosis, psychosis, heart disease, cancer, much easier if you don't allow this energy to flow. So there, by saying right then, 5,000 years ago, only heterosexuality is the norm. Homosexuality is a sin. In Leviticus, it says you should be stoned to death if a man lies with another man. Mm-hmm. Yet, it's an interesting thing. I'm a Jew. I come from a long background of Orthodox Jews. As most people know, the leaders of the feminist movement in the 60s were Jewish women. And I have a gay cousin. I have a gay nephew. I have 2 gay cousins. Through every Jewish family, there's gayness. I mean, more so than even Protestant families and Catholic families. So this was an unnatural thing to say to these people. It only should be heterosexual. So all throughout the history of Judaism is condoning heterosexual, because that means it was still being practiced. if it wasn't still being condemned, if there still weren't laws being about it, it was practice. Why do we have all these laws today? Why did Christianity pick up on it and then put all these laws? You have to be a nun. And where does pedophilia come from in Christianity? From the priests.
Priests.
Who in the original form of Christianity.
Mormonism is a new religion, but I know that they also, I think they partake in.
There's no new religion. Mormons have multiple wives. Are you kidding?
I mean, Mormons are a relatively new religion compared to the others.
No, it's all Christianity. Yeah, but it's all Christianity. Yeah, I mean, the Sikh religion is a new religion compared to Islam in India, and compared to Vedantism, and they treat women terrible. So they're all the same. Patriarchy is patriarchy. Right. It doesn't make a difference. Even Buddhism, even the Buddha.
I think Saudi Arabia just finally banned child brides, I think, recently.
Yeah, but they still do it. They can ban it all they want, but they still do it. No, the Buddha was criticized. So Gautama Siddhartha, who was the Buddha, he was criticized because he wasn't initiating women. And who was the woman that most... He wasn't initiating women into Buddhism, in the original form of Buddhism.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And who was the one who most influenced him and convinced him that he had to stop doing that, initiate women? His mother, who became his greatest disciple. So, again, we'll talk about Tantra. Actually, Tantra, the word just means teaching, but it's considered a form of sexuality, sexual teaching. In India, in China, in Japan, and in Kemet, there were those who rebelled against the patriarchal idea of women being inferior, and again, it was always fostered by women. Another great woman for people to Google, and known as Hypatia, Hyppitai. She was the last librarian of the Library of Alexandria. She was an alchemist, she was a mystic, she was an incredible woman. She was rendered naked and dragged through the streets by a Christian mob to her death. One of the first feminists killed in history.
Wow.
So, but there always were women who stood up. So the Tantric practices, and I practiced Tantra, and I actually studied with Tantric masters. One particular guy, I loved him. We got very close, and we discussed Tantra to the details. And I practiced Tantra. It's basically the idea of a man holding back, learning techniques, breathing techniques, visualization techniques, concentration techniques, learning to control your heartbeat, learning to control the rush of testosterone energy, and to hold back as long as possible. Because the goal of Tantra is for the woman to orgasm first, not the man. Then the man can go. And even this practice has been abused. I used to talk about this with a good friend of mine whose interview you saw, Satyen Raja. A lot of the Chinese Tantric masters were sexist pigs because they would be old men and they would look to have sex with young virgins, young women, and they would just draw their energy. They would not ejaculate. They would not give any energy back. They were just like a spiritual vampire. They would suck energy out of these virgins, and they would learn to ejaculate inwardly and keep the energy in. In fact, this is something that Freud used to say. Freud used to say that our libido, the male libido, is like spiritual gasoline, but there's a limited quantity. So you can't just go having sex all over the place. So he disagreed with Reich, of course. No, because you got to conserve it. But again, that's Masters of Johnson and Freud and Haidt and others in modern art proves there's no limit to our sexual energy. It's all our energy.
That started in the Asian cultures?
Tantra? India?
The idea of holding your energy back?
Yeah, India, China, and Japan.
And some people believe that also helps with like creative force, so you can channel it.
Well, the practice helps you to have a more powerful orgasm for a man, you see? There are a lot of techniques that allow a man to go almost to the edge of orgasm and stop and pull back.
Can men have multiple orgasms in different ways, like women,
yes.
like
yes.
internal?
Yes, but it's much more difficult for men because you have to learn to separate ejaculation from the experience of orgasm. Like I say, with the thing that I sent you, Li Shishen extract, which was created by Chinese tantric herbal masters, continual erection. Erection is not lost when you ejaculate. So you can definitely, with this extract, can experience orgasm after ejaculating. So there's all these different techniques. Breathing, especially. We always, a lot of people get carried away in the sexual act and they hold their breath. They stop breathing. And that usually leads to a more rapid, it leads to premature ejaculation in men. And to women, they can lose the fact of orgasm. if they hold it.
I want to ask you a personal question.
Go.
What do you think about people who have sex with their eyes closed versus people with their eyes open?
Usually it's eyes closed because there's some taboo around it.
There's some taboo? Is that what you said?
Some taboo around it. Why don't people have to have sex in the dark and not in the sunshine? Not out on the beach in Malibu, like you'd like to do in broad daylight, right? No, it's got to be in darkness. You can't see each other. A lot of women don't want men to see them naked because they're ashamed of their bodies. Again, this is what we talked about. Why you were advanced and maybe a lot of your sisters weren't. Because when a girl gets in touch with her body, masturbates at a young age and sees that it's good, it's not told, unfortunately, your mother and father gave you bad messages. Most girls get bad messages. Don't touch yourself. That's not right. It's not right. You shouldn't do that. So you become ashamed of your body.
Yeah.
So you don't even want the man you love to see you with your clothes off. So you have to have sex in the dark.
Yeah, body shaming is a huge thing.
It's so much better to have your eyes open.
I believe
it's so much better to have your eyes open. Actually,
I like to have my eyes open, but most of my partners, it's not. I don't think it's because of me. I'm hoping they don't want to look at me.
No,
You just need that internal experience, I think.
Right. But I've found the best orgasms when you're looking directly in your eyes together.
That's what I think too. Yeah.
And there's the goal of mutual orgasm. That's like a goal, and it shouldn't be goal oriented. But that became in the 70s. In the 70s, when that idea became out, then all of a sudden, every woman had to have that. I gotta have multiple orgasms, or I gotta, But
did you go to Woodstock? True. Did you go to Woodstock?
I was on my way up there. I was in the Air Force at the time, and I was in the service. I got up to New York City, and New York City thruway was closed, so we couldn't get up. But I attended a group in New York City on that Saturday night of a lot of the performers who had been to Woodstock the day before it came back. Yeah. And so I experienced it that way. But no, I know people that did, though.
Many of us, I was born in 1973. Many of us grew up wishing that we had that time period, that we got to experience what you have experienced, that more open, free love. We missed the boat. We missed the boat.
That was 1969. That really began the 70s. It was the 70s. But again, my generation became very conservative. I mean, I don't know how many women today who have been married for many years, who are in their 70s and 80s, who would admit to having multiple partners and having that. Again, the woman I mentioned who ran for president in 1872, Victoria Claflin Woodhull, she ran on the Free Love Party. When she became an older woman, she disavowed it totally. She turned her back on it, she became a Christian, became very religious, and said, no, you shouldn't have multiple partners, you shouldn't have multiple partners.
Well, what about the 1920s, the roaring 20s? Weren't women dressing up as men and trying...
There you had a burst of homosexuality.
Yes. Okay?
And bisexuality.
And that's when the movie industry launched, which was just built on this. Hold on. I got too excited.
Again, you are near where all the experimentation came. Hollywood. It was Hollywood in the 20s, Hollywood in the 30s, where women became outward lesbians and were outward, came out, did not be in secret. One of the great actresses who was a brilliant woman in this period was a lady named Hedy Lamarr. She was Jewish. She was a daughter of a physicist. She actually invented I forgot what she
I remember her.
She was brilliant. She was a scientist as well as an actress, and she was very
absolutely like to this day Playboy level beauty.
Yeah, she was outwardly outwardly, and so were a lot of women in those days. Again, I think Betty Davis was a lot of them.
Right.
So that's what broke it. Yeah, the 20s. The 20s were a period. 100 years ago, we had a cycle where sexual norms were challenged. Again, World War II put everybody back conservative. 40s were very conservative. 50s conservative. Here comes Kinsey and Masters and Johnson. 60s.
That's where taboo, kinky stuff started happening even more because now it's repressed. You're in the 50s. You have to repress.
Right.
Everything's behind closed doors.
This was the beauty of Sherry Height's The Height Report. She learned about B&D, bondage and discipline, S&M, sadomasochism, which we can discuss. I mean, these are practices that people do, but are they natural? Are they normal? I mean, anybody could argue that. People who engage in it and love it, will say, oh, it's perfectly normal and natural. I always say, if a person needs to achieve pain,
right,
to get pleasure, there's something wrong in the process.
In my personal experience, what I realized in this area was a desensitization. If you continue to practice what I call, like, this is what I used to call it in my 20s. I'm so sorry. I'm going to say it. I used to call it sport fucking.
Yeah, sure.
So
sure.
it had zero emotional content.
Sure.
I started to become numb. So I became like an athlete. Like I was an acrobat in bed, but like I didn't feel anything.
Right.
So it got to the point where my bar kept moving higher and higher for experiences so that I could reach something. And I started to realize I was in a danger zone because I started to see I was getting very desensitized.
Right.
And that's where that comes in, where you start going way into the alternative.
That's what happens to a lot of women. A lot of women suddenly get, and again, women are taught to blame themselves. I can't, again, most of the women who came to Freud originally in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s were called frigid. That was the term. Frigid means you couldn't have an orgasm.
Right.
And it was always their fault. It was always the woman's fault. So this still goes on today.
No.
It still goes on today. So many women have lost touch with their bodies, their true selves. And again, your sexual drive is more normal. It's more normal for a woman to be aggressive, to be assertive in her needs.
I'm glad you just said the word aggression. I was just going to ask you about that. That's the theme where people come in and out of being okay with sexuality at all. Is anything aggressive? Some people like that. Some people don't. It's a very strange place.
Absolutely. And that's how we're taught again as children. So I'll give you my personal story. Okay. Sagittarius, Aquarius rising, Mars and Leo. As I said, huge sexual drive. I was masturbating at 12, 13, 14. Okay. But very shy. I had a lot of girlfriends. Again, this is very much a Sagittarian trait. If you know any Sagittarians.
I was married.
Sagittarians, the most important thing is friendship. Friend. Are you my friend? I trust you. Loyalty. I could not, again, you talked about what you call sport fucking. I would just say the difference between fucking and making love. The idea was a man just is supposed to be into fucking, not a woman's into making love. But I was given wrong messages. I didn't know what to do with this energy. Masturbating, and I became a sports freak. I played football, played basketball, softball, baseball. I sublimated a lot of that Leo energy in sports. Okay, let me give you a great story, which I'm glad to tell personally. When I first experienced a sexual rush, it was in junior high school. Because it was in junior high school, about 13, 14, when I suddenly noticed that girls were developing. And there always were some girls who were much more developed than the rest of the class. So there were two young women that I was friends with I think this was our 14, about the 8th grade. And we would do homework together. So we're doing a math problem one day. So one lady, I don't remember her name, but I remember her. And I'm sure she did this on purpose. But we're doing a math problem. I'm sitting at the desk like I am now. She came up behind me, leaned into my back to talk about the problem, and pushed her breasts right into my back. And that was the first time I ever felt that. I just got a rush. I got a rush of energy like, whoa. That feels great.
I call it the power of the breasts.
And I'm sure she did it on purpose. We never talked about it. I never said anything. What are you doing? Da, da, da. She never mentioned anything, but I'm sure she did that on purpose. She wanted me to experience that or whatever, or feel it for herself. Okay? So that's when I first got, whoa. Right. Girls are more than just friends. There's something else going on there. But my whole life, before I could go to bed with a woman, I had to feel she was my friend. Mm-hmm. So I was much more into relationship than I was. One night stands never appealed to me. And I had a lot of them. And they were not satisfying. So again, that was fucking. No, I developed, and you know who taught me? I'm going to continue the story because it's my story. Okay, junior high school, I then went, and your husband probably knows of this school, to an all-boys high school. A very famous high school in the Bronx, New York called DeWitt Clinton High School, known for great athletes. I wanted to play football in high school, so I went to this school. No girls. A lot of women teachers who we all thirsted and lusted after, but no girls. So I became sexually retarded because of that. I get even more shy. Didn't have any ladies in my neighborhood that I was dating or getting involved with. Other guys are sleeping with women and telling me they're getting it. I'm not getting it. Okay. Man. I then go on to college. And I went to a co-ed college in the Bronx, New York. And there's girls in my class and women now. They're women, and oh boy, I'm looking at them, but I'm too shy. I only had like 2 dates the whole 4 years I was in college.
Oh,
I couldn't, I thought, again, the label I was given that the male has to initiate sex. The male has to convince a woman, even if she doesn't want to. No means yes, right? You always heard that. No means yes. You have to, no, come on, please. You know, there's a great movie that Spike Lee, the first movie he did was called She Gotta Have It, about a woman who was insatiable sexually, had multiple partners. And so he always, he would talk about how he played a character in the film, because he always is in his own movies, called Mars Bonfire. And Mars was one of the lovers of the lead character. And he would beg, please, baby, please, baby, please, baby, please, please, please. That was the rap of the movie. Please, baby, you know, to have sex with him. Please, baby, you know, that was begging for it. That's what we used to call it. You have to beg for it. But I couldn't do that. I didn't have, you know, it wasn't natural for me to initiate. So, to make a long story short, at 23 years of old, it became an unsurmountable burden. So I and a couple of friends of mine went down to the Lower East Side of New York and went to some prostitutes.
And
so went to some prostitutes.
Oh.
So my first sexual experience was with a prostitute. However, I met one lady, African-American lady, I still remember her name, Helen, who I would not call a whore or a prostitute. She was what we call today a sex worker. Because there are people who do this professionally nowadays, you know that. They will make love and teach you how to make love, and they get paid for it. But it's not prostitution. It's called sex. They're usually psychologists, and they know psychology, etc. So I came to her and I told her, I mean, I want to learn how to make love to a woman. This is not really what I want. This is sex. Sure, you get off. But this is what she was the kindest and warmest human being I ever met. Leonard Cohen wrote a song about them called The Sisters of Mercy. And that's what she was. She was a sister of mercy. And even a great line in Paul Simon's song, The Boxer, he would say, I'm laying out my winter clothes, going home. He'd say, but I get no offers, just to come on from the whores on 7th Avenue. But I do declare I was so lonesome, sometimes I took some comfort there. La, 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 la. That's me. I took some comfort there. She taught me. So this is something that would shock some people, that I'm going to tell her, that I learned oral sex from a prostitute.
That's probably
I asked her.
That's probably why
she was the cleanest, healthiest woman I've ever been in my life with. Because of her profession, she got checked at a free clinic twice a week for VD. And she would scrub herself out meticulously after every person. So she was clean, smelled like roses. She was perfect. She taught me the clitoris. She taught me what is the organ, not the vagina, the clitoris. She taught me how to stimulate with fingers, with tongue. Again, a man has to learn. Everybody has to learn. We're not talking heterosexist bias here. When two people make love to each other, man and a man, woman and a woman, man and a woman, bi, trans, sex, whatever, they have to learn to use all parts of their body making love. Not just the genitals, the tongue, the lips, the ears, the fingers, the toes. I had a woman achieve orgasm with me just rubbing herself against my leg.
Yeah, I've done that.
So?
Oh, I can orgasm without being touched. Totally. I'm already graduated on all of this. But
so yeah, Freud would call you a realized woman, see?
Peace out.
But during the act, I bet you're pushing yourself and pressing yourself so that it works. And you're still getting clitoral stimulation. Yeah.
But what I wanted to tell you was what I'm learning in my graduate program, because now I'm like retired. So what I'm now doing is I'm learning how to really be with, it's like a kindness that you are giving yourself and you're giving to the other person. It's like
beautiful.
Kindness. You're being
beautiful. And sharing yourself. A
gentleness, a kindness. You're being sensitive and soft with yourself and with other people. Very healing.
Think about it. If men would ever think about it this way, that's the only time in your life when you make love to a woman, you actually come inside, except for being born, that you actually go inside another person's body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sacred.
It's sacred.
It is sacred.
It's
So
totally
yes,
sacred.
a kindness, a gentleness, a thank you. I mean, every man should always say thank you to a woman after the act is over. I mean, you're always grateful to the person you did this. But again, it's you and Riz could probably be tantric master. Again, I met many couples who taught tantric workshops
Yeah.
because of what they had realized with each other. I mean, once
A
two
lot
people.
of really powerful people do that, especially out here in LA. You know, that's very common to have tantric.
Oh yeah, LA, of course, and San Francisco. That's where it started.
Very common. And, you know, I've considered it and thought about it, but I realized that I still have much. Okay, I shouldn't say I have much to learn because I really am. I know where I'm at, but I feel that, God, it's like a full surrender. If you're
Right.
going to teach this, it's a
Right.
full surrender.
And but you've done that. You've done that on top of your interviews here. You're presenting that here. I'm not the first person you've discussed sexuality with. I've seen the other people you've talked with.
Right.
So you're doing it here. You're teaching. You're
I'm teaching. I like the verbal communication because I find that people are very scared of just the conversation, and they're scared to hear the words. Like
that's the first step.
You say fucking, and they get scared, and they get scared that it's coming from somebody that looks like me or whatever, or looks like you. Like there's so many connotations. People have so many definitions and labels and ideas.
Right.
They get scared, and I'm trying to break
there's
that.
been a lot of women I've talked to in my lifetime who never heard the word clitoris.
Really?
Never even heard the word.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that's the ignorance. Again, this is what patriarchy has done.
Yeah,
and like I said, we have since the 70s we have backslid. They're now beginning to teach sexuality again in med school or in high schools, now in high schools, but this has only become in the last 20 years. I mean, it's 50 years since the 70s.
I mean, if you look at our pop culture today, there's such a rebellion that women are just so sick of being in a box, and they're coming out so strong, and they're just saying, I don't care. They're putting their ass in your face. They're gyrating. They're doing all these things. And it's kind of aggressive, and some men like that. But most people are like, why are you doing that?
That it's going overboard. Again, you did want to talk about that. You mentioned that last time. Again, this is part of patriarchy, and it is part of capitalism. Whatever can be objectified and sold as a product will be so in capitalism. So sex is a product. Sex sells. I mean, Hugh Hefner found that out in 1954 when he put Marilyn Monroe nude for the first time in Playboy. And it was the largest selling magazine ever in human history.
Wow, I didn't know that story.
Sex sells. Then came Penthouse. Then came Hustler. I mean, all of them. Sex is
Isn't
big
that
business.
one of the top industries in the world? It's number one. It's money and sex. And they both have the same thing in common is they both require, it's like power. There are power plays involved.
But like everything else in capitalism, it will be distorted. That's why you've got girls twerking on TikTok, showing their ass and rubbing their ass like, do I want to be fucked from behind? No, I'm just showing my ass because that's supposed to be sexy.
Okay, so then what happens, there's a retaliation where then we have, we point fingers at people who are sex trafficking, and we say, you're sex trafficking because we're promoting in the media women objectified and sexualized. What I would like to say is, let's go back to the beginning of patriarchy when it actually really began, because we're just putting our brakes on now, but this is a long-term discussion. This does not happen recently.
Of course.
Men are sex trafficking women.
No. Oh,
this has
no.
been going on since...
You wanted to know harem. You wanted to know harem. Harem, the word harem. Right. It doesn't mean that originally. Do you know the Egyptian word for pyramid is haram? It means old. Something that is very old. So when does that start? Judaism, men can have many wives. Right. Islam today, a man can have 5 wives. It's legal under the law. And up in a country like Saudi Arabia, which you mentioned, women can't divorce. They're hooked for life. In Egypt now, women are divorcing. Egyptian women, because of Kemet, because of the influence of the ancient culture, are the most liberated Islamic women and Muslim women in the world. They're singly driving cars by themselves. They have jobs. They have careers. They're single mothers very much in Egypt. They get rid of their husbands, divorce. A lot of Hakim's daughters all left their husbands. They didn't divorce them, but they left them. What's going on in Egypt, a lot of women are leaving their husbands, not divorcing them, but having a life away from them. But in Saudi Arabia, you can't divorce. You can't divorce. In Iran, are you kidding? So that's it. That began in Judaism. A man could have many wives. But you know that there are cultures that are polyandry? There are cultures in Alaska where women are in the north, in the high north, in the Yucatan, in the Yukon, I'll get it right, in the Yukon, where there is a shortage of women. So that one woman has many husbands, but it's not for sex. It's the fact that there's many shortage of women. But most of the case is polygyny. Polygamy is a general word for many, but it's polygyny, meaning many wives. That begins in Judaism, continues in Greece, continues in Rome, come in Europe. I mean, in European Christian culture, it was quite common to be married to a woman, not like her, and have sex on the outside. And that is where our parents, at least if those of us that have European heritage, grew up under. That most women were not even sexually considered to be the main sexual object in a marriage. The lover was. The outside. And look, it is today. How many men cheat on their wives today? How many men, now women are cheating on their husbands, especially since the 70s. So is marriage natural? One man, one woman? It doesn't last. It doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, it's questionable. It's very...
But here's the thing, though. Again, this is why I never married. I never considered that I was going to be with one partner. I wanted multiple partners.
Especially being Sagittarian.
Right.
Oh
but it came to a point in that I had the conflict. I didn't want one-night stands. I wanted relationships.
Right.
I wanted to be friends. And then friends could turn to sex. And sex would be part of friendship.
Right.
So that's why Sagittarians like to play a lot in sex. We're very playful. We like to not take it seriously. Capricorns tend to take it very seriously because they take everything very seriously.
I feel like
I could go through all the signs with you.
doesn't take it very seriously, neither do Scorpios, but we take it all the way.
Scorpios, though.
And Scorpio is my opposite. So
right.
When I'm
but
with
Scorpios take it to the most intense levels. I live with a Scorpio. Scorpios, you can't be lightweight with a Scorpio. In other words, you can't do a 2-minute fuck with a Scorpio. Oh no. It's got to be serious. And
yeah,
it's
it's
deep.
very intense.
Right.
Yeah.
Taurans are the most sensual sign.
Yeah.
The most materialistic sign. If Taurans go that way, they usually have the biggest cars, the fanciest clothes, eat the most expensive meals, drink the most expensive wine, do the most expensive drugs.
You know what the feeling is from the time I was small, I just want to have sex with everything I see, like the plants, the animals, the water, the air, other people.
You're a Khemetologist woman.
Be in that communion.
You're just a Khemetologist woman reborn. You're a Khemetologist woman reborn.
Yeah. It's the toddler. It's the toddler. We just want to consume everything.
Taurans are very sensual, but a lot of the Taurans I was with had to be in the mood.
Yeah.
Taurans are moody.
Leo helps me. My Leo doesn't need to be in the mood ever.
I could stand on my head. I could strip naked. I could do gymnastics. I could show a 7-inch erection. If she wasn't in the mood, didn't mean shit.
Right. Well, because
when you're in the mood,
I would have been very sensitive because Taurus are very sensitive.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so very moody.
We get very emotional.
And very moody. Right. The Earth women are very grounded. Taurans, Virgos, Capricorns, very grounded, very meticulous, very clean, very fire women are the most passionate. Fire people, the most passionate, the most aggressive, the greatest athletes throughout the history of the planet have been Leo, Sagittarians, and Aries, or people who had, again, we are not just our sun sign. You have to look at the Venus, Mars, and the moon also for sexuality. But in a generalization, I say, but the fire signs are the most aggressive people sexually. Air people are the most intellectual, the most air. They have to see an intellectual basis for their sexuality. Right. They tend to be flighty like Geminis. But again, these are generalizations. They're great people in every sign, and there's nothing wrong. This is not good, not bad. It's just generalization. Right. And the water people are the most feeling, the most sensitive. Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces. Pisces are the most abused people. They're usually the most alcoholics.
I was married to a Pisces and raised one, and I see why they get in those situations. They put themselves there.
They tend to abuse themselves.
They walk right into it. I'm like, what are you doing?
They tend to put themselves down, and Pisces tend to become alcoholics
because they don't understand why it keeps repeating the pattern because they can't see that they're the ones creating it.
But the most critical people are Virgos. Virgo women, the most critical people are Virgos.
Right. That's
Critical,
my book for Erica.
critical of themselves and critical of others.
Yeah. The best thing about Virgos that I have found, because I thought I hated Virgos with everything in my being, but then I realized what their qualities are is that they have the kind of groundedness that can be like, you could lead an army. I mean, you could lead an army if you're a Virgo. And
they're very process oriented. The best computer people usually have strong Virgo. Virgos are computers technical.
Yeah.
But again, each sign has its benefits. Each sign has.
What do you think of those classes and groups? Like they teach you how to orgasm, and they circles, and like you learn the clitoris, and
yes, good, thank you. Because of my wife, she followed up on it. I made a mistake last time. The person that I really wanted to talk about, Judy Chicago was a great artist, but it was Betty Dotson. I can send you her name. She was an incredible artist, drawing women masturbating. And she taught classes in masturbation throughout, and she taught women how to orgasm in the 70s and 80s. She was classic at that. So yes, you can. There are classes.
Those have been shut down, like considered very illegal. But if you do it right, I guess you can get away.
You have to have a license. In California, you have to have a license. You can do this. Right. And so other states too.
You have to follow, safety protocols.
Okay, there'll be classes where they'll tell you there's no nudity in the class, or there's not going to be any sexual overt activity in the class. That's that class. Others will go differently. Others will be, say, a woman-only class where the women will be shown by the instructor how to masturbate and how to touch themselves. And that's perfectly legal these days. And then, again, there's classes for men to teach them how to slow down, how to learn how to touch a woman, how to do this. So there are couples doing tantric workshops all over the place. I know some here in Boulder, Colorado. And again, I had a tantric master I knew in California. It was incredible. And we used to talk about these things.
You think
but it takes practice. It takes a desire. Like being good at sports. Like being good at anything. You have to practice. And you have to go in open-minded.
In Europe, like in Germany and some Eastern, I just know that there's some cultures that orgies are considered like a very peaceful way of coexisting. Like they do it as, it's very holistic almost.
But it's still outside the norm.
It is.
We in the U.S. We in the U.S. have been more open about group sex than Europeans. I mean,
oh, really?
Scandinavians are very open, very sexually.
Oh, really?
Open. Yes.
I wondered about that. I felt like they were more open in general. They're more nude. They walk around nude.
They don't. That's like the Khemetologist were. I mean, do you know most women in Kemet went around bare-breasted? And so it wasn't such a amazing. Some men wouldn't come at a young age and say, "Oh, women's breasts." So see, we're a breast fascinated, obsessed culture.
Oh my God! Because is it just the U.S. that's like that, you think, or is this?
No, it came from Germany. It came from Germany. It came from a lot of European immigrants who came here. The women would not show themselves. They were very self-conscious of their bodies, and so young boys. I never saw my mother's breasts. I didn't see breasts until a prostitute. Until I saw a picture of movies or pornography. That's why pornography is so big in the U.S. Again,
that's like what is that, like a $56 billion industry or something?
Oh yeah, it's incredible. It's probably $1 trillion these days. But so it's because of repression. These things come out to be objectified. Women are objectified because they're repressed. And
but
so
also, I think pornography is a bridge. If you use it correctly, it's a bridge that helps you feel like you can be intimate or connect with other humans.
I should show you my collection.
Isolated.
I should show you my collection. There's a difference between pornography and erotic art.
That's true.
Erotic art goes back. Erotic art goes back again to the Cometians who portrayed women bare-breasted. In fact, Nefertiti, who we discussed, the consort of Akhenaten, she developed her own style of fashion by just exposing her left breast and covering the right. She made a fashion statement, and all the other women followed her. But most women went around in Kemet bare-breasted. Most women went around nude. And so genitals were seen, so it wasn't something so spectacular, amazing. We're hidden here. Reason why we think we're so open sexual, but it's children are not given the messages, not given the bad messages about their genitals, so they go into pornography, they go into S&M, sadomas. That's where the perversions come. Again, Rajneesh said, if you suppress and repress that energy, it only appears as perversion.
In your experience and your impression of Freud, do you think that he had some sexual perversion of any kind?
No, what I think it was, he just didn't understand women.
Ah.
He just did not understand women and did not think women were equal to men as human beings.
Sometimes I wonder if he had Asperger's.
Well, he actually developed cancer of the jaw. And Jung actually predicted it to him because he was always biting down on his cigars, biting viciously. It means he was anxious. Something was wrong. Freud was always sad that he was never given the credit. In other words, he wanted psychoanalysis to become a science, to become like biology, zoology, and it didn't. And so he was always mad and obsessed and angry because people didn't understand psychoanalysis, didn't understand what he was teaching. But,
well, you're familiar with TikTok, right? TikTok is that social media group.
I just said so, yes.
So the kids go on that. Okay, so
Yes.
from what I understand about TikTok, it started off just kids singing songs and dancing.
Right.
It's gone all the way into pornography now.
Right.
And, you know, my
Right.
kids are on TikTok, and so they're so desensitized.
Right.
I'm so fascinated. I watch, you know, my older teens and adult kids.
A lot of it disgusts me because I see a lot of ignorant white Christian white girls thinking they're being sexy when all they are doing is inviting to be raped.
Right. Now, inside of that, here's my fascination as a scientist, engineer, philosopher. I watch this and I am fascinated how the reaction of my daughters, their reaction is they are so desensitized from media that they almost don't even notice. They almost don't even notice that it's considered pornography. They're like, so what? It's just tits. Like they are so beyond because they were raised with Hannah Montana and all these shows with like girls and Miley Cyrus and
Miley Cyrus, right.
They don't even have that. There's no contrasting belief system. They don't have that framework where there's like boundaries or borders. So imagine 10 or 15 years from now, 20 years from now, where we're headed is that it's all going to be in the pot. Everything's going in. It's like everything goes. It's like starting to go into like, I don't know, are we going to go back to Kemet? Like, I don't know what's happening.
Well, if we get to the awakening, but where it's heading now in this downfall is now people are not having sex as much. Do you know that in Japan, young women are not having sex?
Because of anxiety.
Right. And also because of bad messaging, like you're saying. So what do they do now? They invent these robots. The Japanese are great at inventing sex dolls. Sex dolls that have very believable mouths, believes it can perform oral sex. They could have very believable vaginas, so that men don't need.
So real. Oh my God.
All of these men, all of these men who have received terrible messages all their life and cannot get a woman to go to bed with them now can get a sex doll.
And the
women
one that they
totally objectify.
Yeah, and the one they want, the way it looks with the boob size and everything, and also it's they don't talk back. But you know, this one guy, I'm so glad he did it. I don't know if it was on YouTube or a documentary, but him and his wife did a very extensive interview that he is a maker. He makes these sex dolls. I think he's in Australia, and he is professional. His work looks just as real as me. I mean, he's amazing. And he has his own collection and he sleeps with them. And the wife talked about the relationship. And she said, so he has date night with the mannequins or with those sex dolls. And she knows that those are the nights that he's with them and she lets him have those. It's like an affair. She goes, but you know, it's not real or whatever.
Because it's not a person. It's safer for her. It's safer for her.
Her face is like stone cold, and then his face is like ashamed. Like he looks like a little boy who got capped.
It's not real. That's not real. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, real. I mean, it's kind of like, where's this going? I think there's just a lot of experimentation happening, and
this is the degeneration of Amun.
Well,
okay. This is the height of Amun degenerating, so that we're totally objectifying everything.
Okay, so let me say something positive. Imagine we have VR now. Virtual reality. Right. We have VR porn. We have VR. Now we have exoskeletons, and they are creating futuristic experiences where you can have sex with AIs and feel it. Now, guess what? It just matches our sci-fi movies because that's where it looks like the future is headed. You go to a sex shop, you go hook yourself up to a VR machine, choose your avatar, choose your experience, go have your ejaculation or whatever, go have your sex with, it's AI, it's augmented.
Right.
So where are we? So it's like, are we headed to like lack of physical intimacy? Are we headed
No, I'll tell you where that's heading.
Yeah.
To extinction of the species. How's that? There was a group called
No!
there was a Christian group called the Shakers. Have you ever heard of them?
Of course.
The Shakers, yeah. But
Of
did you know
course
that
I know the Shakers.
they did not practice sex? They did
Right.
not procreate, right?
They're the
What happened to
precursor
them?
to the
What happened to them? They went extinct.
died out.
Aha. We continue that
Nothing
way.
beats the human.
I'm telling you, that's what will happen. If it continues on that path, there will be no more reproduction.
Well, that means
There'll be
we
no
gotta-
more human race.
Well, let's talk about the Asian population. So we have tons of gamers, tons of sex shops, tons of pedophilia. I'm not making them wrong or pointing them out. What I'm saying is that they feel they're at the cutting edge of technology. And so they bring in sexual technology. If you go in YouTube and watch some of the stuff that they do, they have like minivans that are totally decked out. And it's like a YouTube show. They get a girl off the street and have a hot guy and he seduces her and the whole thing is filmed and there's a bunch of guys jerking off to them and watching. It's like a fetish. And then after the girl leaves and she's mortified, but she's embarrassed and somehow she feels like a star and she goes down the red carpet and the guys are all clapping and bowing and she's bowing.
So sick.
Okay.
That is sick.
So can I tell you, this is because of repression. This is because of repression.
Right.
This is what this is. And that's why in India there's so much rape is because
Hello?
of repression.
Women are crazy because men are stupid.
It's patriarchy.
Women have to educate men. That's what
Yes.
you're doing. That's
Yes.
what this whole show
So
is
now
about
we're
for
back
you.
to aggression. So women don't want to be aggressive in this area. This is
It's natural. You're teaching that it's natural. Don't think of aggression as testosterone.
Right.
Don't think of aggression as male.
Right.
Aggression is just
I'm just
being
talking
yourself
yin
assertively.
yang.
Being yourself assertively. That's
Okay,
all.
so if I'm in my yin, I'm not really wanting to be aggressively trying to get a hold of a yang personality and try to mold that man into what I need. So I stay in my yin, and women could be waiting forever for a man to show up, or a man to understand what's happening.
And a lot of women
So-
do wait forever.
Yeah. Not me.
Well, it's because there aren't
I
enlightened
just refuse. I'm just
there aren't enough aware enlightened males. I am a minority of my generation. Most of my generation sold out. The Woodstock people you talked about. Free love. How many people were fucking like crazy at Woodstock? Do you know that day event, August 15th to 19th, 1969, 9 months later, was the highest reported birth rate in the United States.
Wow.
Woodstock conceived thousands of babies. There were 400,000 people there. At least a couple of hundred children were conceived there, at least. So we don't need these type of events, though. I mean, the idea is for us to wake up. We're turning now to our Khemetologist talk. This was the goal of Hakim's teachings. With the age of ominous, darkness, ignorance, separation, male, female, gay, straight, all of these fucking labels.
Right.
So now we have to wake up. So you and I and Riz and people like us are the light workers. We're the here. I love this beautiful story. We talked about Rajneesh. This is one of my favorite Rajneesh stories. He's saying, I am enlightened. What is the difference between me and you? Those, Jesus, Moses, those people we say we're enlightened. He says, we're both standing on a mountaintop and we're looking at the sunset. And I, with my eyes wide open, are saying, see how beautiful, see how wonderful. But I turn to you and you have your eyes closed. So I'm tapping on the shoulder. Wake up. Look at the sun. That's all we're doing, Oriah.
That's all we're doing.
We're trying to wake people up, see life for what it really is. Forget about what religion tells you. Forget about what parents have told you. Forget about what education has told you. Forget about what other society, even what books have told you. Learn who you are. And you will see, as your Riz has said, we are multifunctional, multisexual, multidimensional beings with unlimited potential. Only limits we put are those we accept on ourselves. We take the label, I am a Jew, I am a male, I am a white man. That means I'm not black, I'm not red, I'm not gray, I'm not Christian. No, I am a human becoming. That means every human on this planet is my brother and sister. Whether they hate me or not, and many would want to kill me, whether they want to or not, they are my brother and sister. There is only the sesh. That's what the Commission's taught us. Only the people. Not red, not black, not brown, not Jew, not Christian, not Muslim. Not woman, not man. They didn't differentiate. The sesh, the people.
I mean, it comes down to just body parts. I mean, it's just body parts.
The plumbing is only 1%. That's the hormones that make the plumbing. It's different. And men evolve out of women, so we're still the same creature.
You know what I want to talk about on our next show? A very hot topic. I want to talk about transgender. I want to talk about the age of when you decide and when you feel responsible that you can change your body. Are you mature enough to change your body and have a huge surgery going from male to female, female to male, and how massive of a change psychologically, emotionally, and physically that is?
Right.
And how is it positive? Is it negative? How does it work? And, you know, I'm not an expert. I know you're not an expert, and we're not doctors, but I definitely want to give an educated I do want to have an educated conversation about that, because I don't think enough people are talking about it. And too many doctors are handing out, you know, cards to young people saying, sure, let's change your body. And kids are still not even sure what they're doing. And they're like, you know, it's a big.
And then you get a famous person who has great influence like J.K. Rowling, and she's very anti-trans. And she's got a lot of people that are backing her now. She doesn't think a trans woman should be able to go into a woman's bathroom.
Right, because they have a male upbringing. But then you're going back into gender bias.
We're going to talk about it, okay? We talked about XX is usually thought female, XY is usually considered male. But we're not taught that there's also XXX, there's XYX, there's XYY, there's XXXY. There's at least 5.
Are the chromosomes that exist?
Yes.
Like what is
These are trans people. Trans people usually have the extra chromosome. That's why a man thinks he's trapped in a woman's body. A woman thinks she's trapped in a man's body.
Yeah,
so they have to go through the physical change. In Kemet, they wouldn't have had to go through the physical change. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, let's talk about next show. Stephen, thank you so much. Oh my God, this was so enlightening. I appreciate you so much. I can't wait.
I hope you'll send this one to your daughters too.
I know. I almost talked about them, my four daughters, how I raised them in sexuality. I will say one thing about them, just to give them a nod. I will say my oldest is 27, my youngest is 14.
Wow.
What I did is I decided to take a hands-off approach, more of like a mother hen kind of hovering. I'm up here watching, and I let them do all their experimentation, all their sexual experiences.
More a friend than a dictator.
Never said a word. I only just explained STDs and I explained rape and how to avoid it. That's it. I let them do everything they needed to do. Some of them came out conservative. Some of them are like a little bit more like me, more adventurous. And I don't mention their bodies. I don't talk about their shape. I don't talk about. You
let them be who they were supposed to be.
Yes, because the second the mother says something, I'm programming, and I have no right as a being to program like that. That is not up to me. All I could do is empower and teach them to have self-respect and take care of their bodies, be clean, healthy, mature.
And they see that their mother's proud of her body. They see that the mother is self-realized and happy within herself. So that's the role model.
That's what they see.
That's it.
Thank you, Stephen. I love you. And thank you to your partner too, because without her, you may not be here with all this information.
Let me do one thing, because I have to be remiss. I have to give her name is Teresa Crater. You should make friends with her on Facebook. She is a novelist. She has written great metaphysical novels. So we'll talk more about that. I've not promoted her. I've not given her a commercial. Your people would love her books.
Oh my God. Okay.
Crater, Teresa, Theresa, Crater. We'll talk more about it.
Okay. All right. Have a great day. Thank you so much, Stephen.
I'm back to harvesting. I got to go trim and trim and trim.
Go trim.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.